guys, and welcome to Faewood. So today, Mavis is finally getting a new ball gown. The Goblin Ball is going to be very soon, at the end of April. Now, I've been planning a costume for this for quite some time because before everything happened with the world, there was some earlier dates for the Goblin Ball. Obviously, like the ball hasn't actually gone ahead for a couple of years, I think it's been. In Melbourne in particular, as you guys know who've been with me on my channel and probably heard in the news in various places, because we're notorious now as being the most locked down city in the world. So we were locked down for nearly, I think it was 2/3 of a year that we were locked down. It was over 200 days, something like 260 days or something like that. So obviously events like this didn't go ahead for quite some time because of all of that. But, you know, every time a date would come up for the Goblin Ball, you know, where we'd all be hopeful that it could go ahead, I would sort of have a think about what costume I wanted to make. And I even ordered a bunch of things. I've had a couple of different iterations in my head of what I might wear to the Goblin Ball over the period of time, and actually ordered things both times. Never shared them with you guys because, you know, I didn't want to do that in case it didn't go ahead, which it didn't. So, and yeah, my idea for the costume has changed, as I said, during that time, and even most recently changed again, to be honest, because I'll show you the pattern I was originally going to do, is this one. Now, if you know Berta, you know what I would have been getting myself into by doing this pattern. Berta is just notoriously difficult. The instructions were, like the ones that I've used from Berta, have been so hard to follow, to the point where I even had to make it up in the end. Like, usually for all the other patterns, like, I'm new and I'm a novice and I don't always understand patterns at the best of times. In fact, my mum thinks it's so funny that I sew now, because I was like the least likely person to sew. Growing up, I was definitely a bit of a tomboy, and I hated sewing. I didn't know how to do it. I thought it was like another language. And when I did like a home ec class, I don't know even know if they still do home ec classes, but you know, we would learn how to cook and sew and all of that sort of domesticated stuff. We learned how to sew, and I was meant to make this pair of shorts. I wanted to make shorts because I wore a lot of shorts at the time. And yeah, I couldn't do any of it. So my dad actually roped in a family friend who basically made the shorts for me while I sat next to her, because I was useless. So the fact that I'm here with you sewing is quite an amazing turnaround from where I started when I was young. Aside from my little hand-stitched clothes that I mentioned I used to make for little troll doll characters, sewing was definitely not my bag. So anyway, I did think I was going to use this pattern from Berta, but my vibe, my idea, the thing I'm sort of going for is like a fairy that's actually quite ultra feminine, which is actually, again, also not usually my bag. I'm not someone who likes the super girly stuff. Like, I'm definitely feminine, but I don't like frou-frou. You know, I'm not sort of one to go for the super ultra feminine. I like it on other people. It's just doesn't feel like me. But you know what, I just, for some reason, felt like I wanted to do that for this costume. I got an email the other day, as you do with sales and so forth, and you know, I clicked into it, just having a browse. Lincraft was having a sale, and I had a look, and I like to look at the patterns in there as well, just to see if there's anything new that I haven't got, even though I've got a fairly good pattern stash these days. Anyway, I saw this one, and I was like, ooh, that's pretty. That's really pretty. But I could totally picture this as a fairy. I don't know, there was something just about it with what I have planned. You know, like, I've got a lot of different embellishments that I've bought, so I've got this sort of vibe in my head, and I feel like this fits it. The other challenge being, like, I did have a look through some of my patterns. I've put on a bit of weight since the lockdowns and everything like that, which a lot of us have. It's difficult to fit into patterns. Compared to the clothing sizes that I wear, I'm always having to use a much larger pattern than the size of clothing that I wear. So I did have to try and find one that fits. I think this is going to fit. I am going to double check my measurements. If it doesn't fit, then we might take a left turn and do something else, but fingers crossed this one will work. One other thing too, it is a bit boobalicious right there, so I don't know that I'm really wanting to let the ladies out quite that much, so I may need to put something underneath, or I don't know. I'll probably do something or other to not quite have too much cleavage, depending on how that looks, but it seems quite boobalicious. So as for fabric for this pattern, I originally bought silver fabric, and this was when I was planning to do the birder pattern. But because I've changed my mind with what I'm doing as far as pattern goes, I needed a contrasting fabric for this part. So I'm thinking the silver's going to be where the red is, and then I needed a contrasting fabric. Now, the pattern calls for taffeta, and I would have loved to have used taffeta. I was like looking at all different taffetas, and there's all these sort of kind of iridescent one. Oh my god, they're amazing. But when I was looking at the cost, it would have been probably $200 or so worth of fabric that I'd have to order on top of what I've already spent. And like, I had a voucher for Spotlight. That is, again, thank you to Rachel, aka Saber, who spoils me rotten. But it helps me bring things to you guys. So I was looking at Spotlight and thinking, oh, I could use my voucher, but they didn't have any taffeta. So I looked at what else they had at Spotlight, and instead of taffeta, I went for a satin. Now, I went for this because I saw someone else do the pattern and use satin as their contrast fabric for the skirt and everything, and obviously it worked for them, so I figured, okay, well, it's not the taffeta. I mean, that's definitely would have been my first choice if money was no object, but I figured this might go well with the silver, and my palette's going to be sort of pastels with silver, like blue and purple pastel-y colours with the silver. Problem is, so I did it online and got my meterage, but I think they've sent it from 2 different stores, and they gave me 2 different, slightly different colours. Now, I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but they are slightly different colours. So when I saw that, I was like, oh no. That's not going to look the greatest, because it's not going to look intentional unless, I don't know, I could maybe use certain pieces in certain spots so it looked intentional. Yeah, I don't know that I'm going to use this. I might actually instead use this. So we just happened to stop into a secondhand shop a couple of weeks ago now, I want to say, and I was having a look, and they had this tiny little stash of like fabric, and I had a look through there, and I found this huge stash of brocade fabric, and it was $10. Such a good deal. And there seems to be a fair bit here. So if there's enough of this, then I think I'm going to go for it. You know, I think the silver with the blue could look really nice. I have already bought a lot of embellishments for this as well, and they are going to be in like lavender. So I think I've got some blue as well. I'm going to have to pull it all out, but I think I've got lavender, blue and silver and those sort of colours. So I can bring those colours in with this, and this will complement that really nicely, I think. That's where we're at. I think I've babbled well and truly long enough. We better get started because we've got a fair bit to do. Alright guys, I thought I would check in with you all. It's been about a day and a half all up of just cutting pattern pieces. I'm always surprised at how long it takes to cut pattern pieces. I don't know why, but I always think, oh, it shouldn't take me too long to do that, even though I've done it a few times, and every time it takes me a really long time to cut all the pattern pieces. So I've cut out like lining pieces, I've cut interfacing pieces, and then there's like 2 different fabric type pieces. What I've been finding so far with the cutting of the pieces is the silver fabric that I've got, it wants to like curl up when I cut it, and I think it's because the silver threads, the way it works once you've cut where the fabric is, it allows it to be able to curl on itself. I'm hoping that's not going to be an issue for me, but we shall see. Another thing is that the hip measurements apparently are 117 for the largest of the patterns, which is the size 22, I think. Now, I am bigger than that these days, unfortunately. So I'm really hoping that that's not true. What I find a lot of times with patterns, which I find it really annoying, and I have talked about it before, is, you know, for plus size people, if you've got bigger hips than the pattern says, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to fit into it. It seems like they don't really accurately list how big your hips could be to fit into it. Often the skirt's quite full, it's not going to be an issue because it's open and full, and so you could have much larger hips and still fit into it. I'm hoping that's going to be the case. It does look on face value like that's going to be the case, but I have already cut the pattern pieces now, and somehow I'm going to make this work. I have also realised that there's a lot of fraying happening, and that's to be expected, I guess, because I'm using brocade for one of them. The lurex, I wasn't sure what that was going to do when I cut it, but that is also fraying quite heavily. So I may need to, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to do some like zigzag stitch or something around the pieces just to make sure they don't fray too much. So that's going to take me a little bit of extra time. Better get started.
One eternity later.
Well, after hours of sewing and a couple of bobbins of thread, I have finally sewn around all my pattern pieces. I can't believe how long it's taken, and I haven't even sewn any two pieces of pattern together yet. I'm just cutting and prepping. But if you can see the threads coming off that, like the level of fraying that's happening, it doesn't seem like it's fraying any further. This is just fray that was already there. So I'm going to try and trim that back for all the pieces just so I don't have any frayed bits sticking up anywhere and it doesn't sort of, I don't know, get caught or make it difficult to sew things together. So basically that's all I've managed to do all day is like, I think I cut out the last few pattern pieces this morning, which I'm not even sure if I filmed that. Some of it I did and some I didn't, just because you don't need to see all of that. It'll be so boring. Same with sewing all of this. Like I filmed like, I don't know, a couple of minutes of me sewing, and then it's like basically more of the same. So nothing exciting has happened as yet. So I've just been putting interfacing on parts for the top / robe is I think what they were calling it. And thank goodness for this interfacing. It's a sew-on one that you use for this.
My God, you're greasy.
And yeah, I'm really glad that I've got that on there because this fabric hasn't been easy to work with because of all the fraying. But, you know, obviously I did do the stitches around to stop all the fraying. Holy cow, that took so long. And then once I did that though, things were starting to curl up even more. Like this lurex wants to curl anyway, and then when I sewed around it, all the pieces were kind of curling in on themselves, and they still do a little bit, but the lining is helping that a little bit. It's probably not the greatest of choices for fabric, but I didn't know, and yeah, I don't have enough money to go and revise the fabric at this point. Like, again, I say I'd love to do the taffeta, but I had to bow out of that one cost-wise. So, yeah, it did take me a while to work out what on earth was going on, which... If you've watched me sew before, you know that I am fairly new at this. I've done a few patterns now, but, you know, I still definitely muddle through. And so basically it tells you to do these pieces with your interfacing, right? And so I'm doing that and I'm like, oh, piece 8, where's piece 8? You know, everything else was the outside fabric. Yeah, makes sense. And then piece 8's lining. And I'm just like, is that right? Or do I have another piece 8 in a different fabric that I cut out? Kept going back to like the layouts and stuff. There's no piece 8. Why am I doing it on lining for this but not for this? Like I just didn't want to go ahead and do it and then turn around later and go, oh crap, I've got to redo all that, cut a new piece, blah blah blah. And then it dawned on me that this lining is going to go on the back of the really long bits that I cut, which, I mean, that's kind of one of them there. This is like the same shape as the top of that, and that's why it's going on this and not like the big piece of fabric. Anyway, just thought I'd mention that because I just figured if anyone else is in the same boat and you're looking at that going, why is piece 8 lining and everything else isn't? Because it doesn't mention that. It's just like, put the interfacing on all of these pieces. And you're like, okay. Yeah, so anyway, that seems to be right. I mean, we'll see. And then I also had to remind myself that a couple of the pieces were in the contrast fabric and not the silver fabric, because again, I was like, I've used all the silver fabric pieces I cut. What's going on? Anyway, so again, I say like progress has felt slow because that took a while to do all of that. But I will finally be sewing some pieces together. Like, honestly, I've done all of this work and I still have not sewn 2 pieces together. I mean, unless you count sewing the interfacing on the back of these, but I feel like I've been chatting so much in between doing things for this one, so I suppose I better leave you there because we've still got so much to go. Figured I'd check in. I've done a fair bit more sewing now, although it still doesn't look like too much at this point, but you can start to see the front part forming there. It's starting to come together, like you can see the pieces all sort of forming that will go like this is the armhole here and stuff like that. So it's finally feeling like I'm making something rather than just sewing individual pieces of pattern for various reasons, which is nice because there's been a lot of sewing and very little like movement as far as it looking like a pattern. I think I've chosen a size down from what I should have chosen. So yeah, I guess upshot is that it's feeling like it's going to be a little tight. Like I tried just to see how it would sit around me, and I don't know, I might need to put like, I don't know, a strip of material in the front or something. Maybe once I get to that point I'll feel like I can fit, or maybe I can get some sort of like, I don't know, control underwear that sucks me in enough that it fits. I don't know. This is like where I'm sure all of you are going, you should have done a mock-up, and I know. I just don't even have fabric that I could just throw away to a mock-up right now either. Like, I'll have to do it in the future because this is like really showing me how much you need to do that. But holy cow, I would have had to do so much work just to get an idea that it doesn't fit. And then like this has been so much work already, and this is like having to do that twice. Holy cow. I just anyway, I'm just gonna forge ahead because I feel like worst case scenario I can probably sew in some sort of panel or something at the front that it looks decorative but is really just to allow it to fit me. Also, I don't know what's going on with the bottom part here, but it really wants to twist on itself. get some lining now with boning in it. The boning I get is the only one they have at Spotlight, which seems to be just this like plastic based kind of boning. I'll get a piece and show you. I also have Fizzy running around in here because he was desperate to come in for some reason. So he is very much enjoying himself. Actually, I don't even know if you'll be able to tell, but those are two different versions of boning they've had at Spotlight. They're pretty similar, although one seems to have a little bit of fabric on it. The boning they were talking about in the pattern, I don't know if they specify, but it said something about removing the boning from the casing, which makes me think that there's a different type of boning that like it's different to what I'm using. Because, I mean, I can remove the little plastic bits, I guess, from this if I really try, but it's kind of hard. But I don't think that's what they mean, because like these would just be then long, thin, like very, very thin bits of plastic, and this is just plastic.
Whoa, plastic.
Like there's no, you can't remove that from anything. So hopefully that's okay. And the other thing I also struggle with, like again, you know, if anyone is here who is, can you hear Fizzy down there? He's meowing at me. If anyone here is like, you know, an excellent sewer and that sort of thing, and watching me for tips, hopefully by now you've realised that's not going to happen. I am a novice. As a novice, I will say one thing that I am never quite sure about is which way round to put my boning, because at least with the boning I have, and maybe also the way I store it, I don't know if there's a better way to store it, but you know, it's in a, like curled up into a little, you know, circle, I suppose, and then when you cut it, it's got a bend to it. And then it's like, oh, which way round do you want the bend to go? And I was like, oh, I guess I should probably put it the way round that would curve into the waist. But then I thought, oh, maybe it'd be better to like alternate so that it's like not bending too much in one direction. I don't know. Does anyone know? I just went with alternating it a little bit, even though it sort of tends to bend in this way, but oh well. Hello, Fizzy. Oh. Fizzy is very happy to be running around in the studio, aren't you, Fizzy? He's been very clingy today, purring like a freight train. I think honestly he's just happy to get away from the kittens for a little bit because they can kind of get in his space a lot. Like, they really love him, but I think sometimes he's just like, just give me some space. Isn't that right, Fizzy? They've got too much energy. You're as happy as a clam, aren't you? I guess I'm not going anywhere for a while. Oh, my big boy. What's going on? You're so cuddly. Hello, you're so cute. Checking in again, and it is starting to look more like the top of the costume. There's 2 sleeves that this comes with, right? So that's what it looks like, and the outfit has like a double sleeve thing going on. And I was looking at it and thinking, I might get overheated. I prefer to have a shorter sleeve and to need to put something on rather than be stuck in something I can't do anything about and overheat. So for that reason, I've decided to not go with the longer of the 2 sleeves and just stick with the shorter one. Yeah, so anyway, that's where we're at. I've got to do the sleeve. There's a fair bit of hand stitching in this pattern, I will say. Like, that's taking me quite a bit of time. Like, I thought I would be further along by now, potentially, but yeah, just the hand stitching and stuff like that's taking me a while. Like, I feel like I'm getting better with pattern instructions, but I'll show you. So I sort of struggled with this part here where it's telling you to stitch the upper and lower parts. It tries to illustrate the stitches with these dotted lines, but the problem is it's also got the stitch marks for previous stitches with dotted lines, and I sort of really wish there was some colour or something or something just to differentiate it a little bit more, because I had to look at that picture for so long to work out which stitch lines I needed to do, and again, that's, you know, a lot of it is probably me just being not the greatest of sewers and kind of new to all this still. But yeah, I think I've worked it out. It's that kind of thing where I did it and I was like, oh, I hope this is right. I'll try and look ahead and see if it looks like the other steps that come up are going to make sense with what you're doing. And then this part here, I had to, like, everything else was kind of hemmed and attached to the lining and that sort of thing, and I turned it inside out so the lining was sitting in there and everything like that. But then the bottom, it's like, oh, baste it together and just fold it up and hem it. And I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, everything's like looking lovely and finished, and then you've got these like basted edges that are just raw and not looking amazing. So yeah, I'm still not sure if I did that right. I think so. I kept looking at it over and over, and from what I can tell, that's how you do it. So those are the issues I'm having at the moment. And that's not least to say that the final product is looking like it may not fit me. I should have sized up. It was a difficult judgment call because the next size up seemed like it was a few more centimetres, or a couple of centimetres at least, bigger than my bust size. I mean, I think it's hook and eye that I put on it to actually do it up, and I haven't done that yet, and maybe it will go on and it'll be okay, maybe. I don't know. I keep trying it over my bust and like sort of holding it, and but we forge ahead. Yes, I know. Should have made a mock-up. Trying to make some adjustments to the shoulder here because yeah, you can see it really doesn't fit my shoulder very well, so I've pinned this one in a little bit, but it's hard because I'm trying to make adjustments on myself and pin it, and I don't know how people do that, like adjust clothes to themselves. We'll see how this goes. This is what I have so far, guys. I can't sort of stand back any further here. I've been away for, I don't know, a couple of weeks. I've been really unwell. Wasn't COVID. I just got a really bad flu and I'm still really unwell. Like, I'm still recovering from it. It really knocked me around. But I thought I really need to get started again on this costume because the Goblin Ball's at the end of April and I'm going to need something to wear. So I thought I'd better get started again working on this. I have to say, I don't love it. Like, I like the colours, I like elements of it, but the fit is terrible, and partly I think it's got a lot to do with the fact that I've put on weight over lockdown, and that's, really changed my measurements and made it quite tricky, and I'm still learning sewing, so being able to adjust a pattern, I just don't know what I'm doing. So I go into these things hoping that the pattern itself will fit, because I really just don't know how to adjust it, but I am in the position of having to adjust it now, and I'm gonna have to start mocking things up. But I did make some adjustments, like I did a lace up here. This was actually meant to sort of pull right in, but it's just too tight. I should have sized up one more. I think that would have solved some issues, but also I think the problem is, like, my waist to boob ratio is not ideal. What I'm also finding though is the shoulders are sitting terribly. I've tried a few things. I did tuck in some of the fabric because they were sort of hanging further, so I sort of tucked the fabric in, sewed it and cut it. That helped a little bit. I've also made these little shoulder pad things, and that has filled it out a little bit here, but it's not fantastic, and I still don't know what I'm going to do about it at this stage. My husband thinks it looks fine, but I'm just like, I hate the fact that I feel like the whole thing just doesn't fit very well, which is just disheartening, because, you spend all this money on fabric and to get to this point and be like, oh no. It's also hard because, like, if I put my arms up, it really pulls the whole thing up and then it gapes even more, but I don't think I can do anything about that. And I'm sort of like, do I just strategically embellish it to cover up any issues that I might have? And then I also wonder, like, because I'm going to be wearing fairy wings, or at least that's the hope, that might destroy the look of the neckline anyway. So upshot is, guys, I don't know what I'm going to do. It is very possible this project won't even come to you because it's such a train wreck so far. I don't know. I love the colours though. I do like the embellishments I've put on it so far. Like, I really like the lace. I like the concept of it. It's just the execution has not been ideal. As you can see, guys, there's still a lot to go with this costume. I've got the skirt to go, I've got a whole lot of embellishment to go, so stay tuned for the next video to see what happens with the costume. Hopefully everything goes well and I love it in the end. Subscribe if you want to see more from me, and for the rest of you, I'll see you next time in Faewood. Bye, guys. Bye, guys.